Everybody, it's Maria from cardbomb.com, and I'm so glad you're joining me today because today I am sharing a project made with the new release from Tonic Studios. It released yesterday and it's called Garden Party. So in this release there are 8 new stamp sets, and this one is called Celebrate Friendship and this is Celebrate Sentiments. So I am going to be building a scene today and I want to show you how it goes with the masking. So I've put down my little cow and the watering can, and the first thing that I'm going to do is stamp those images onto some masking paper so that I can mask images and build a scene behind the images that I want to appear in front on my card. So now I'm stamping out the little outfit on top of that so I can cut out my cow wearing the outfit I want the cow to be wearing. And now I've stamped the outfit first onto my card because I want the outfit to be in the very front. And now I'm masking off the little outfit and the watering can. Now I've got to get my cow lined up perfectly so that when I stamp the cow, she's going to be in the right place and not offset from her little dress. So I'm using a piece of acetate to get that lined up properly. And after that, I'm able to stamp the cow down and mask it off. Then I added flowers, and now that the flowers, the cow, and the watering can are all masked, I'm adding the picket fence into the background. Now we're ready to peel off that mask and see how the stamping came out. So the cow and her dress are in the front, as are the watering can and the flowers, and the picket fence is in the background just like I had hoped. Now let's move on to the coloring. I'm using my Nuvo alcohol markers to do all of the coloring on this work today. The only exception is that towards the end I'll add in a little bit of pencil just for some shading. So when I color with my Nuvo alcohol markers, I like to start first with the lightest shade, then go to the medium, then the darkest shade. Generally I use only 3 shades, sometimes I do add more, but depending on the number of shades I then work backwards. So if I'm using 3 shades I go light, medium, dark, and then back to medium and back down to light. So right now I'm doing that on this wooden fence, and I've just filled in the whole fence with the lightest shade of brown that I'll be using. Now I'm moving on to my medium shade, and I'm just coloring all of the areas in that I feel like should be a little bit darker because they're in shadow. Once I make it across this whole fence coloring in the shaded areas, I will go back to my lightest brown marker and I will just color over all of the edges of that medium shade to make sure that the light and medium shades blend perfectly. So right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm using my lightest color marker and I'm just going in and blending the different shades together. Now I'm onto my darkest marker and I'm adding in some of that darker shading. After I make it across the whole fence, adding shadows in below the cow's tail, between the pickets on the picket fence, behind the flowers, everywhere that light would be blocked in real life. Then after I add all those extra shadows in, I will go back in with my medium pen and I will blend out the darkest colors so that they blend well with the medium. So that's what I'm doing right now. You can see both pens kind of going back and forth. The thing about alcohol markers is that you want them to saturate the paper. So if you're not getting a good blend, use both of the markers quickly, meaning don't let the first layer of marker dry before you add the second shade in. So if you're not getting a good blend, there's a possibility that you might be letting the first layer of color dry before you apply the second layer of color, and when they're wet they blend much more smoothly. So now I've moved on to the grass. I've used both the bullet and chisel nibs of my marker to get a nice color of that light green color. And I'm going in with the second color now. I really like the bullet side of these markers because they can get into these tiny little areas without bleeding into, for example here, I'm coloring in between the picket fences and I'm not having any problems with the ink bleeding into my picket fence. The bullet nibs work really well for fine details. I'm blending together all 3 of my colors for the grass, and you can see that I'm just going over it repeatedly in order to get those 3 colors to blend really well. Now I've moved on to the sky, and I'm only going to use 2 colors for the sky. I've started with my lighter blue, which is a true lighter blue, tending a little bit towards a gray, and I've decided that I wanted to add some clouds into the background for a little more interest. So what I've done is just to outline the clouds with the bullet side of my marker, and then I go in and I fill in all of the other areas. This will make it so that the clouds look white with a blue sky. I'm using my chisel nib now so that I can get smoother color application across the whole background, and it also allows me to move more quickly so that the ink doesn't dry before I hit it again with my marker, and that helps me to get a smoother application as well. Now I'm moving on to my second color of blue, which is a bit more of a blue-green. I wanted to just have a deeper shade of blue a little bit lower in the skyline just to give it some variation. Then I used a little bit of a purpley pink to add some shadowing to the clouds. Sometimes clouds have a little bit of a heavier look on the bottom of them, and that's what I wanted to do there. And I'm using my blender pen as well to soften the edges of the clouds. That blender pen can be used kind of as an eraser or an ink lifter, but here I used it to soften the edges of the clouds. Now I'm moving on to the flowers, and these are so small that I've decided to keep them really simple. So I only used 2 colors to color the main flowers. I used a yellow and then an orange for the center, but I blended it out with the yellow so it had a soft transition. Then I used that darker cherry color just to make a couple of dots in the centers of the flowers, and those dots don't show up very well in this video, but you'll be able to see them in the close-up pictures of the card on my blog. Now I've grabbed a pink marker and I'm working on my cow, the butterfly, and the little hearts on the watering can in her dress. I'm moving on to using some lighter tan brown colors to color in the cow. And first I work on getting some shading around her arms, her ears, and her face. One of the tricks that I'm using both for her pink cheeks and for some shading that I'll do above her nose is that I'm coloring and then I use my blender pen to color over it once just to lighten up the color a little bit so that it looks like shadow. Now I'm using some grays to do the watering can. After I used 3 different colors to do the watering can, I felt like it wasn't quite the shade of gray that I wanted it to be, so I grabbed my Nuvo watercolor pencils. These are great pencils, by the way, and I added a little bit of extra shading, and I used some of the different colors to add shading to the cow as well. Adding shading using these pencils really adds some nice texture. The markers go down really smoothly, but when you add the pencil, you can see that it's a little bit rougher and it's a nice texture. After adding some extra details with gold and white gel pens, I decided that was enough for this card, and I'm happy with the way that it turned out. The last thing that I need to do is stamp the sentiment, and there's a perfect sentiment for this card in that new stamp set I showed you earlier. You are like no other. There are quite a few really funny puns in this stamp set, and this is one of my favorites. So I've used that, and my stamp positioner helped me line it up perfectly. That's my finished card for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're interested in seeing more of this release, please head on over to my blog. The link is in the description below. I'll see you guys back here really soon. Bye-bye.